The elder Ian added quietly, "She loved you, and I her." But there'd never been so much as a smile from her father for Ian. "You passed university at Edinburgh?" "Yes, sir. In the law." "That what you do over in the colonies? Practice law?" "A bit, yes." "Everybody there dressed in that fashion?" he asked, pointing the cane disdainfully at Ian's Western-style leather clothing. "No." Ian supposed he did look out of place in his wide-brimmed hat and the leather duster over his black shirt, leather trousers, and gun belt, but he felt no more out of place than he had growing up. England's vast navy and merchant fleets were made up of men from all over the world, and as a consequence there were mixed-race children throughout the Empire's port towns. But in the tiny Scottish coastal village of his birth, there'd never been anything like Ian before, and many of the locals went out of their way to make certain he knew it. As a child, to be singled out and taunted simply for one's parentage had hurt, but he'd used the slurs and bullying to make himself stronger and smarter. To cower and cry would have proven true all the negative things he'd been told about a man with his blood. He'd found prejudice in America, too, but he was no longer a child and could hold his own. His grandfather reached into a pocket of his worn red waistcoat and withdrew a small leather pouch that he passed to Ian. "What is this?" "The dowry I never allowed your mother to have. It's your inheritance now." And apparently he had nothing more to say. Turning away, he began walking to the coach where his driver stood ready and waiting beside its open door. After taking a few more steps, however, he stopped and glanced back. The aged green eyes that met Ian's held hints of regret. The two men faced each other with only the past and the howling wind between them until his grandfather spoke. "Because she loved you when I could not. Go with God, Ian, but never return to my lands again." Tight-lipped, Ian watched as his grandfather climbed inside and the coach rumbled away. Ian put the bag of gold into his coat and refocused his attention on his mother's headstone. He offered a few prayers and whispered a final goodbye. "Farewell, my beautiful Colleen. May God love you as much as I. Rest in peace." He mounted his stallion, Smoke, taking one last look around at the wildly beautiful place that would hold her, and in many ways himself, for eternity. He reined his mount around and galloped off to meet the ship that would sail him back home to America, where he was known as a bounty hunter named the Preacher. Chapter 1. The wind gave our children the spirit of life. Chief Joseph. Dowd, Kansas, May 1889. Preparing dinner in the kitchen of the whorehouse where she worked as the cook, Maggie Freeman decided she'd had enough. If the owner, Hugh Langley, tried to force himself upon her again, she'd have to give her notice. In truth, such a decision made little sense. In a town as small as Dowd, Kansas, the chances of hiring on somewhere else were slim to none, but she knew she had no other choice. Maggie's father, Franklin, a black Civil War veteran and staunch Lincoln Republican, and her mother, Morning Star, a woman of the Kaw tribe, had been killed in a fire when Maggie was 12. She'd be 25 in December and had been on her own since the day they died. Dowd was a dozen miles south of Kansas City, and she'd been employed at Aunt Phoebe's whorehouse for 2 weeks. Her previous position as a washerwoman in the household of the mayor and his wife in the neighboring town of Madison had been short-lived. Because it was a well-known fact that all blacks and natives steal, Maggie had been accused of taking a brooch that belonged to the mayor's wife. And in spite of her fierce claims of innocence, she'd been promptly arrested and jailed. The brooch, which had actually been misplaced by its squat, hairy-chinned female owner, was found the next day in the pocket of one of the woman's day gowns. The charges were dropped, but there'd been no apologies forthcoming from the mayor or his wife, nor had they offered to reinstate her. So Maggie'd saddled up her old mare and ridden the 6 miles west to Dowd.